The rain hammered against the windows of the small apartment building like angry fists demanding entry. Detective Marcus Rivera pulled his patrol car to the curb, squinting through the windshield wipers that could barely keep up with the downpour. His German Shepherd partner Rex shifted restlessly in the back seat, sensing something was wrong even before they stepped out into the storm. The call had come in around midnight. A neighbor reported hearing children crying from apartment 2B, but when they knocked, nobody answered. The landlord mentioned that the tenant, Sarah Martinez, was a single mother with twin daughters, 8-year-old Emma and Lily. She worked double shifts at the local diner to make ends meet, often leaving the girls alone for hours at a time. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and opened the car door. The wind immediately tried to rip it from his hands as sheets of rain soaked through his uniform within seconds. Rex bounded out behind him, his thick coat offering better protection against the elements than Marcus's thin jacket. Together they approached the 3-story brick building that had seen better days. The building's front door hung slightly ajar, creaking on its hinges with each gust of wind. Marcus pushed it open and stepped into the dimly lit hallway that smelled of mildew and old cooking grease. The fluorescent light above flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Rex's claws clicked against the worn linoleum as they climbed the stairs to the second floor. Apartment 2B sat at the end of a narrow corridor. Marcus knocked firmly on the door, announcing himself as police. The only response was the continued wailing of the wind outside and a faint sound that made his blood run cold, the soft whimpering of children from somewhere inside the apartment. He tried the door handle. It turned easily, unlocked. The door swung open to reveal a small, cluttered living room, lit only by the glow of a muted television. Fast food containers and empty bottles littered every surface. The air was thick with the smell of spoiled milk and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify, but made his stomach turn. Rex immediately began sniffing around the room, his training kicking in as he searched for any signs of danger. Marcus called out again, identifying himself and asking if anyone was home. The whimpering grew louder, coming from what appeared to be a bedroom down a short hallway. As Marcus made his way toward the sound, his flashlight beam revealed the true state of the apartment. Garbage overflowed from plastic bags in the kitchen. Dirty dishes were stacked so high in the sink that they had begun to topple over. The carpet beneath his feet felt sticky and damp, though he couldn't tell if it was from spilled drinks or something worse. The bedroom door was partially closed. Marcus pushed it open gently, not wanting to frighten whoever was inside. What he saw made him grip his flashlight tighter and reach for his radio. 2 small girls sat huddled together on a bare mattress on the floor. They were thin, almost skeletal, wearing clothes that were several sizes too big and hadn't been washed in what looked like weeks. The twins looked up at him with huge, frightened eyes. Their faces were pale and gaunt with dark circles underneath that spoke of malnutrition and exhaustion. One of them, slightly taller than the other, wrapped her arms protectively around her sister. Neither of them spoke, but their eyes followed Marcus's every movement, with the wariness of animals that had learned to expect only bad things from adults. Rex padded into the room behind Marcus, and something remarkable happened. The smaller twin, who had been completely silent, made a tiny sound and reached out toward the dog. Rex, despite his training to remain alert and focused, seemed to sense the children's need. He moved slowly toward them, lowering his head so they could see he meant no harm. Marcus knelt down to their eye level, keeping his voice soft and gentle. He asked their names, whether they were hurt, and when they had last eaten. The taller twin, who he would later learn was Emma, whispered that they hadn't seen their mother in 3 days. She had left for work as usual but never came home. They had been too scared to leave the apartment, surviving on crackers they found in the kitchen and water from the bathroom tap. As Marcus called for backup and child protective services, he began to notice other disturbing details about the apartment. There were locks on the outside of the bedroom door, suggesting the children had been confined. The windows were nailed shut from the outside, making escape impossible. In the kitchen, he found a notebook with what appeared to be schedules and notes written in Sarah Martinez's handwriting. But the content made his trained eye narrow with suspicion. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the apartment, Marcus worked to gain the trust of the 2 frightened children. Rex proved to be the key to breaking through their fear. The dog sat patiently as both girls tentatively petted his soft fur, the first genuine smiles Marcus had seen crossing their faces. When the paramedics arrived, they confirmed what Marcus already suspected. The twins were severely malnourished and dehydrated. They would need immediate medical attention. As the children were being examined, Marcus continued his investigation of the apartment, Rex at his side. In Sarah Martinez's bedroom, they discovered something that changed everything. Hidden beneath the mattress was a metal box containing hundreds of photographs, documents, and what appeared to be correspondence with multiple individuals. The images were disturbing enough to make Marcus, a veteran officer with 15 years on the force, feel sick to his stomach. The photographs weren't just of Emma and Lily. There were images of other children, some Marcus recognized from missing person reports that had crossed his desk over the past 2 years. The documents revealed a network that went far beyond one troubled mother trying to make ends meet. This was something much darker, much more organized. Rex had been trained to detect various scents, and his behavior near the bedroom closet caught Marcus's attention. The dog kept returning to one particular spot, pawing at the carpet and whining softly. When Marcus pulled back the carpet, he found a loose floorboard. Beneath it was another box, this one containing even more disturbing evidence. As the storm finally began to subside outside, Marcus realized that what had started as a routine welfare check was about to become one of the most significant cases of his career. The twin girls, Emma and Lily, were not just victims of neglect. They were part of something much larger and more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The night was far from over, and the real investigation was just beginning. Detective Marcus Rivera had worked many difficult cases during his 15 years with the police force, but nothing had prepared him for what unfolded over the next 48 hours. The storm had passed, leaving the city cleaner, but somehow feeling more dangerous as the investigation into the Martinez apartment revealed layers of corruption and abuse that reached far beyond one neglectful mother, Emma and Lily. Martinez were recovering in the children's hospital, their physical condition slowly improving under the care of medical professionals. The doctors reported that both girls showed signs of long-term malnutrition and psychological trauma that would take months, if not years, to fully address. Child psychologist Dr. Amanda Foster had been assigned to work with them, trying to piece together their experiences through gentle conversations and play therapy. Marcus found himself returning to the hospital each day, drawn by something he couldn't quite explain. Rex seemed to share his concern for the girls, and the hospital staff had made an exception to allow the therapy dog to visit. The transformation in the twins when Rex appeared was remarkable. Emma, the more protective of the two sisters, would actually smile and speak in complete sentences when the German Shepherd was present. Back at the police station, the evidence collected from apartment 2B had attracted the attention of federal investigators. Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit had arrived from the state capitol, bringing with her a team of specialists who worked specifically on organized trafficking cases. The photographs and documents found in the apartment were being analyzed by experts who could identify locations, dates, and potentially other victims. The missing person reports that Marcus had recognized in the photographs were causing a stir throughout the department. 3 children who had disappeared over the past 18 months were clearly visible in images found in Sarah Martinez's possession. This wasn't random. It was systematic. The local missing children cases had been handled by different officers at different times, so no one had noticed the pattern until now. Agent Chen explained to Marcus that they were likely looking at a trafficking ring that used seemingly ordinary people like Sarah Martinez as operators. These individuals would recruit or acquire children, then document and distribute evidence of abuse to paying customers across the country, and potentially internationally. The operation required organization, technical knowledge, and a network of corrupt individuals in positions of trust. Marcus learned that Sarah Martinez had no criminal record prior to this case. She had been a regular employee at Murphy's Diner for 3 years, never missing shifts and generally considered reliable by her coworkers. Her neighbors described her as quiet but friendly, always saying hello and occasionally asking for small favors like borrowing sugar or checking her mail when she traveled. Nobody suspected that behind her ordinary exterior lay someone involved in such horrible crimes. The investigation into Sarah's background revealed troubling information. She had moved to the city 4 years ago from across the state, claiming to be fleeing an abusive relationship. The twins' father was listed as unknown on their birth certificates. Social services had never received any reports about the family, despite the obvious neglect the children had suffered. Someone had been very careful to keep this situation hidden from authorities. Rex proved invaluable during the continued investigation of the apartment building. His nose led investigators to discover that apartment 2B wasn't the only location being used for criminal activities. In the basement of the building, hidden behind what appeared to be storage units, Rex detected scents that led to the discovery of a sophisticated setup, including photography equipment, computers and communication devices. The landlord, Thomas Brennan, initially claimed complete ignorance about what was happening in his building. He said he rarely visited the property, collecting rent through a management company and handling repairs through contracted workers. However, when investigators examined the building's renovation records, they found that the basement modifications had required permits and inspections that Brennan would have had to approve personally. Agent Shen's team discovered that the basement had been soundproofed and equipped with multiple internet connections routed through various service providers. The technical setup suggested that live streaming had been taking place, meaning that the abuse of children had been broadcast to viewers who paid for access. The financial records associated with these activities showed significant amounts of money changing hands through cryptocurrency transactions and offshore accounts. Meanwhile, Dr. Foster was making progress with Emma and Lily. Through careful questioning and observation during play sessions, she learned that the girls had been confined to their apartment for months at a time. They spoke of other children who had been brought to the apartment, but who had later disappeared. Emma, being older and more observant, provided details that helped investigators understand how the operation worked. The twins described men who would visit the apartment late at night, always when their mother was present. These visitors would bring cameras and other equipment, setting up in different rooms while the children were forced to participate in activities they didn't understand, but instinctively knew were wrong. Emma had tried to protect her sister as much as possible, but she was just a child herself, powerless against the adults who controlled their lives. Marcus found these interviews almost unbearable to sit through. Even though Dr. Foster was skilled at keeping the conversations age-appropriate and non-traumatic, the detective had to step outside several times to collect himself, Rex following loyally and somehow sensing his partner's emotional distress. The dog would rest his head against Marcus's leg, providing comfort that no human words could match. The technical analysis of the equipment found in the basement revealed connections to similar operations in 12 other states. Agent Chen explained that they were dealing with a network that had been operating for at least 5 years, generating millions of dollars in revenue from the exploitation of children. The Martinez apartment was just one node in a much larger organization that recruited vulnerable families and used financial desperation to force compliance. Sarah Martinez remained missing, her whereabouts unknown since the night of the storm. Her car had been found abandoned in a parking lot across town, with no signs of struggle or indication of where she might have gone. Agent Chen suspected that she had been warned somehow that law enforcement was closing in and had fled. According to a predetermined escape plan, the investigation expanded as authorities realized they needed to examine every aspect of the twins' lives to understand how they had been acquired and controlled. Medical records showed that both girls had been treated for various injuries over the years, but always at different hospitals and clinics, never establishing a pattern that would raise suspicions. Someone had been very careful to avoid detection by spreading their activities across multiple institutions and jurisdictions. As the second week of the investigation began, Marcus received a call that would change everything again. A social worker in a neighboring county had seen news reports about the case and recognized Emma and Lily from photographs. The social worker had been looking for the twins for over 2 years, not because they were reported missing, but because they had never existed in the first place according to official records. The girls had no legitimate birth certificates, no medical records from infancy, and no documentation of ever attending school or receiving any government services. According to every official database, Emma and Lily Martinez had never been born. This discovery opened up terrifying new possibilities about where the children had come from and how many other victims might be out there. living invisible lives in the shadow of a criminal network that seemed to have tentacles reaching into every institution that should have been protecting them. The discovery that Emma and Lily Martinez had no official records of birth sent shockwaves through the investigation team. Agent Chen immediately contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, while Marcus found himself staring at photographs of two little girls who, according to the government, had never existed. Rex sensed the tension in the room, moving closer to Marcus and resting his head against the detective's knee. Dr. Foster's sessions with the twins took on new urgency as investigators tried to understand their origins. Through patient questioning and the use of age-appropriate techniques, the psychologist discovered that the girls had fragmented memories of living in different places with different people before coming to the apartment with Sarah Martinez. Emma spoke of a woman with red hair who used to give them medicine that made them sleep, and a man with a deep voice who would take photographs of them even when they were very young. The FBI's technical team had been working around the clock to trace the digital footprints left by the criminal network. What they found painted a picture of an operation that was far more sophisticated than anyone had initially imagined. The network operated like a legitimate business, complete with customer service representatives, technical support, and even a primitive rating system where subscribers could request specific types of content. Marcus accompanied Agent Chen to interview Thomas Brennan, the building owner, for a second time. This interview took place at the federal building rather than the local police station, and Brennan arrived with a lawyer who seemed nervous about something beyond his client's potential involvement in the case. The lawyer kept interrupting questions and asking for private consultations with his client, behavior that suggested there was much more to discover. Under pressure, Brennan finally admitted that he had been receiving monthly payments far in excess of normal, rent for apartment 2B. He claimed that he believed Sarah Martinez was running some kind of internet business and needed extra space for equipment. When Agent Chen showed him photographs of the basement setup, Brennan's face went pale and he requested another private consultation with his attorney. The breakthrough came when Brennan's lawyer made a surprising announcement. His client was willing to cooperate fully in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Brennan, it turned out, was not the mastermind of the operation, but rather a victim of blackmail himself. 3 years earlier, he had been caught in a compromising situation with a woman who turned out to be working for the criminal network. They had recorded the encounter and threatened to destroy his marriage and reputation unless he provided properties for their operations. Brennan's cooperation led investigators to 2 other properties in the city that were being used by the network. Both locations had been modified similarly to the Martinez building, with soundproof spaces and sophisticated recording equipment. The scope of the operation was becoming clear, and it was much larger than anyone had initially suspected. At the children's hospital, Emma and Lily were showing signs of physical recovery, but their psychological healing would take much longer. Dr. Foster had discovered that both girls suffered from a condition called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, common in children who have experienced prolonged abuse and control. They had learned to be hypervigilant, constantly watching for signs of danger and ready to protect each other at a moment's notice. Rex's visits to the hospital had become a bright spot in the twins' recovery. The girls would spend hours gently brushing the German Shepherd's coat and telling him stories about their dreams of having a normal life. Emma had begun drawing pictures during her therapy sessions, and many of them featured a large dog that looked remarkably like Rex, always positioned between the girls and shadowy adult figures that represented their fears. The investigation took another dramatic turn when one of the other properties yielded evidence that connected the local network to similar operations across the country. Financial records showed payments coming from and going to locations in 15 different states, suggesting a national organization, with local cells operating semi-independently. But following the same basic model, Agent Chen explained to Marcus that this type of decentralized structure was common in sophisticated criminal enterprises. Each local operation was kept relatively small and isolated from the others, so that if one was discovered and shut down, it wouldn't immediately compromise the entire network. The people running each location often knew very little about the larger organization, making it difficult for law enforcement to trace connections and identify leadership. The twins' medical examinations had revealed evidence of systematic abuse that had been ongoing for years. The pattern suggested multiple perpetrators and locations, supporting the theory that Emma and Lily had been moved through different parts of the network as they grew older. DNA evidence collected from the children was being compared against databases of missing persons and unsolved cases. Marcus found himself becoming emotionally invested in the case in ways that he knew weren't entirely professional. He had always been good at maintaining appropriate boundaries between his work and personal life, but something about Emma and Lily's situation had gotten under his skin. He began visiting them at the hospital, even when it wasn't necessary for the investigation, bringing small gifts and spending time playing simple games that helped them feel safe and normal. The financial investigation revealed that the network was generating substantial revenue through multiple streams. Subscribers paid monthly fees for access to live streams and archived content. Premium customers could pay additional amounts to request specific scenarios or interact with victims in real time through chat functions. The most disturbing discovery was a tier of service that allowed customers to request in-person meetings with children, suggesting that the network facilitated both online and physical abuse. Dr. Foster's work with the twins had uncovered fragments of memories that were helping investigators understand how the network acquired and controlled children. Emma spoke of being taken from a nice place when she was very small, possibly 4 or 5 years old. She remembered crying for someone she called Mama June, but being told that this person didn't want her anymore. These memories suggested that the girls might have been taken from foster care or some other institutional setting. The search for Sarah Martinez had expanded to include federal resources and international cooperation. Her photograph had been circulated to border crossings and airports, and financial investigators were tracking any activity on accounts associated with her identity. However, Agent Chen suspected that Martinez was probably using false identification and might have already left the country entirely. Rex's training as a detection dog proved valuable in ways Marcus hadn't expected. When the team searched the third property identified by Brennan, Rex immediately alerted to a section of wall that appeared normal, but had been recently painted. Behind the wall, investigators found a cache of documents that included birth certificates, social security cards, and other identity documents for dozens of children, including Emma and Lily. The documents revealed the true scope of the network's operations. Children were being given false identities and moved between different operators as they grew older, or became too recognizable in their current locations. The paperwork was sophisticated enough to pass casual inspection by schools, medical facilities, and even some government agencies that didn't conduct thorough background checks. Agent Chen's team discovered that the network had been operating under the protection of several corrupt officials in various agencies. A city social worker had been taking payments to avoid investigating certain families. A clerk at the Vital Records office had been creating false birth certificates and other documents. Even a judge had been compromised, ensuring that custody cases involving network children were decided in favor of the criminal organization. As the third week of the investigation concluded, Marcus realized that the storm that had brought him to apartment 2B had uncovered something that would take years to fully unravel. The network they were fighting had roots in multiple states and connections to international criminal organizations. Emma and Lily were not just two little girls who had been rescued from a terrible situation. They were witnesses to a criminal enterprise that had destroyed countless lives and generated millions of dollars in profit from the worst kind of human suffering. The twins were slowly learning to trust the adults who were genuinely trying to help them, but their recovery would be a long process requiring patience, skill, and resources that the system was barely equipped to provide. Marcus knew that their story was far from over, and that the real battle to bring their abusers to justice was just beginning. 3 weeks after the storm that changed everything, Detective Marcus Rivera found himself sitting in a federal courtroom watching as the first arrests in what had become known as Operation Broken Chain were being processed. The investigation had grown beyond anything he could have imagined that night, when Rex had led him to discover Emma and Lily huddled together on a dirty mattress. Agent Chen had assembled a task force of 30 federal agents, state investigators, and local police officers from multiple jurisdictions. The scope of the criminal network they were fighting required coordination between agencies that rarely worked together, and the complexity of the case was testing everyone involved. Marcus had been assigned as the primary local liaison, a role that kept him intimately involved in every aspect of the expanding investigation. The twins had been moved from the hospital to a specialized care facility that dealt specifically with children who had been victims of trafficking and organized abuse. The facility was located in a different state for security reasons, as investigators had discovered that the criminal network had been monitoring law enforcement activities through corrupted sources within various agencies. Emma and Lily's safety required complete separation from their former environment. Dr. Foster continued to work with the girls through secure video connections and periodic visits to their new location. The psychologist reported that both children were making progress, but their recovery was complicated by the depth of their trauma and the fact that they had never experienced normal childhood development. Emma had begun to speak more freely about her experiences, while Lily remained largely silent except when Rex was present. During video calls, the financial investigation had uncovered a web of transactions that spanned multiple countries and involved sophisticated money laundering techniques. The network had been using a combination of cryptocurrency exchanges, offshore bank accounts, and legitimate businesses as fronts to process payments from subscribers around the world. Conservative estimates suggested that the organization had generated over $50 million in revenue over a 5-year period. Marcus learned that the network's customer base included individuals from all walks of life, from construction workers to corporate executives to government officials. The subscriber list contained names that shocked even experienced investigators, including people whose jobs involved protecting children or maintaining public trust. Each arrest revealed new connections and led to the discovery of additional victims. The search for Sarah Martinez had finally yielded results when she was arrested trying to cross into Canada using false identification documents. During her initial questioning, Martinez claimed to be a victim of the network herself, stating that she had been forced to participate in the abuse of Emma and Lily through threats and blackmail. However, financial records told a different story, showing that she had been receiving substantial payments for her role in the operation. Rex had become something of a celebrity within the law enforcement community, with his role in the initial discovery leading to requests for him to assist with other trafficking investigations. Marcus was proud of his partner but protective of the special bond that had formed between Rex and the twins. The dog's presence seemed to be one of the few things that could reliably calm both girls when they became distressed. During therapy sessions, the investigation had revealed that children were being acquired by the network through multiple methods. Some were taken from foster care systems by corrupted social workers who falsified records and created fake placements. Others were acquired from desperate parents who were told their children would receive better care and education, but were actually being sold into the trafficking system. A few, like Emma and Lily, appeared to have been taken as very young children and had no memories of their original families. Agent Chen's team had identified at least 47 child victims of the network, ranging in age from toddlers to teenagers. Many of these children had been recovered from locations across the country, but others remained missing and were presumed to have been moved to different networks or taken out of the country entirely. The international scope of the investigation was requiring cooperation with law enforcement agencies in Canada, Mexico, and several European countries. The corruption investigation had led to arrests of officials in multiple agencies and jurisdictions. A family court judge in the state capital had been taking payments to approve custody arrangements that placed children with network operators. 2 FBI agents had been selling information about ongoing investigations to criminal organizations. Local police officers in 3 different cities had been providing protection for network facilities in exchange for cash payments. Marcus found the betrayal by fellow law enforcement officers particularly difficult to process. He had always believed in the integrity of the system he served, despite knowing that individual officers sometimes crossed ethical lines. Discovering that some of his colleagues had actively participated in the exploitation of children challenged his fundamental beliefs about justice and duty. The technical investigation had uncovered the sophisticated methods the network used to avoid detection by law enforcement. They employed multiple layers of encryption, used communication systems that automatically deleted messages after specified time periods, and moved their online operations between different servers located in countries with weak cybercrime laws. The technical expertise required for these operations suggested that the network included individuals with advanced computer skills and possibly connections to other criminal organizations involved in cybercrime. Dr. Foster's work with Emma and Lily had provided crucial insights into how the network controlled its victims. The children had been subjected to a systematic program of psychological manipulation designed to make them compliant and afraid to seek help. They had been told that their families didn't want them, that law enforcement officers were dangerous people who would hurt them, and that attempting to escape would result in punishment for both themselves and other children in the network. The twins had developed remarkable resilience despite their circumstances, creating their own private language and support system that had helped them survive the worst experiences of their young lives. Emma had taken on a protective role for her sister that went beyond what any 8-year-old should have to bear, while Lily had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense adult moods and intentions, helping both girls avoid situations that might escalate into violence. Rex's training as a therapy dog had been put to the test as he worked with other child victims recovered during the investigation. The German Shepherd seemed to understand that these children needed gentleness and patience, adapting his behavior to provide comfort without overwhelming them. Several other victims had begun speaking for the first time since their rescue after spending time with Rex. The legal proceedings were complicated by the interstate and international nature of the crimes, requiring coordination between multiple prosecutors' offices and court systems. Federal prosecutors were handling the most serious charges related to trafficking and organized criminal activity, while state prosecutors dealt with charges related to child abuse, corruption, and other crimes that fell under local jurisdiction. Marcus had been called to testify before a federal grand jury about his initial discovery of the twins and the subsequent investigation. The experience of describing what he had found in that apartment to a room full of civilians was emotionally draining, but he knew that his testimony was crucial for securing indictments against the network's operators. The media attention surrounding the case had been intense, with news outlets describing it as one of the largest child trafficking investigations in the country's history. However, law enforcement agencies had been careful to limit the information released to the public, both to protect ongoing operations and to preserve the privacy of the victims. The twins' identities had been completely sealed, and even their current location was known only to a select few investigators. As the fourth week of the investigation concluded, Marcus realized that they had only begun to scratch the surface of the criminal network they were fighting. Each arrest led to new information about additional victims, more corrupted officials, and connections to other criminal organizations operating around the world. The storm that had brought him to apartment 2B had not just rescued 2 little girls. It had exposed a system of evil that would take years to fully dismantle. Emma and Lily were safe now, beginning the long process of healing and learning what it meant to be children rather than victims. But Marcus knew that their recovery was just the beginning of a much larger battle against organizations that profited from the suffering of the most vulnerable members of society. 6 months had passed since that stormy night when Detective Marcus Rivera and Rex first discovered Emma and Lily Martinez, and the investigation had grown into the largest multi-jurisdictional trafficking case in recent history. The courtroom where Marcus now sat was filled with federal agents, local detectives, prosecutors, and victim advocates, all waiting for the sentencing of the first major defendant to be convicted in Operation Broken Chain. Sarah Martinez had ultimately pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges in exchange for her cooperation with investigators. Her testimony had been crucial in identifying other network operators and locating additional victims. But Marcus struggled with mixed feelings about the woman who had directly participated in the abuse of 2 innocent children. During her testimony, Martinez had broken down multiple times, claiming that she had been coerced into the network through financial desperation and threats against her own safety. The twins were now living in a specialized foster home run by a woman named Carol Thompson, who had 20 years of experience caring for children who had survived trafficking and severe abuse. Carol's home was located in a rural area, several states away from where the girls had been rescued, providing them with the security and privacy they needed to begin healing. The location was kept secret from everyone except the core investigation team and a few trusted court officials. Dr. Foster had continued working with Emma and Lily through a combination of in-person visits and secure video sessions. The psychologist reported remarkable progress in both girls, though their recovery remained fragile and would likely continue for years. Emma had begun attending a special school program designed for children with trauma backgrounds, while Lily was working with speech therapists to address selective mutism that had developed during her captivity. Rex had become an unofficial therapy dog for the entire investigation team, providing emotional support not just to the child victims but also to the law enforcement officers who were dealing with the psychological toll of working on such a disturbing case. Marcus had noticed that several of his colleagues were struggling with depression, anxiety, and sleep disorders as a result of what they had witnessed during the investigation. The financial investigation had yielded results that exceeded everyone's expectations. Federal agents had frozen assets worth over $80 million across multiple countries, funds that would be used to compensate victims and support their ongoing care. The network had been far more profitable than initial estimates suggested, generating revenue not just from subscriber fees but also from the sale of children to other criminal organizations and individuals willing to pay for exclusive access. Agent Chen had been promoted to head a new federal task force dedicated specifically to combating organized child trafficking. The success of Operation Broken Chain had demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated multi-agency investigations, leading to increased funding and resources for similar operations. Chen had asked Marcus to consider joining the federal task force permanently, an offer that he was seriously considering. The corruption investigation had resulted in indictments of 17 public officials across 8 states. The scope of the betrayal within various institutions had shocked even experienced investigators, revealing that the network had systematically identified and recruited individuals in positions of trust and authority. A federal judge, 3 state court judges, 2 FBI agents, 8 local police officers, and multiple social workers and government clerks had been arrested and charged with crimes, ranging from bribery to direct participation in trafficking operations. Marcus had testified in federal court 6 times over the past 4 months, describing his initial discovery of the twins and subsequent investigation activities. Each testimony was emotionally difficult, requiring him to relive the night of the storm and recount the terrible conditions in which Emma and Lily had been living. However, he understood that his testimony was crucial for securing convictions and ensuring that the perpetrators received appropriate sentences. The international aspects of the case had led to arrests and seizures in 12 countries, with law enforcement agencies in Europe, Asia, and South America identifying local networks connected to the organization that had controlled Emma and Lily. Interpol had created a special working group to coordinate these international investigations, and Marcus had been invited to participate in briefings about global trafficking patterns and enforcement strategies. Rex's role in the investigation had evolved beyond his original duties as a detection dog. The German Shepherd had been trained to work specifically with child victims, learning specialized behaviors that helped traumatized children feel safe and begin to trust adults again. Several other police departments had requested consultation on developing similar programs, recognizing the unique value that properly trained dogs could provide in sensitive investigations. The twins' progress in their new home had been steady, but challenging. Emma had initially struggled with nightmares and panic attacks, particularly when she encountered men who resembled individuals from her past. However, Carol Thompson's patient care and Dr. Foster's ongoing therapy had helped her develop coping strategies and begin to enjoy normal childhood activities. She had discovered a love of reading and spent hours each day absorbed in books about adventures and fantasy worlds far removed from her traumatic experiences. Lily's recovery had been more complex, as her younger age at the time of the initial trauma had affected her development in profound ways. She had difficulty trusting any adults except Carol and Dr. Foster, and would become extremely distressed when separated from Emma for even short periods. However, she had shown remarkable progress in expressing herself through art and music, creating drawings and songs that helped her process her experiences without having to verbalize them. The legal proceedings had been complicated by the need to protect the child victims from further trauma while ensuring their testimony could be used effectively in court. Special arrangements had been made for Emma and Lily to provide testimony through closed-circuit video from a secure location, with Dr. Foster present to provide support and ensure their psychological safety. The girls' bravery in describing their experiences had been crucial in securing convictions against several defendants. Marcus had been working with victim advocates to ensure that Emma and Lily would receive the long-term support they needed for their recovery and future development. Federal crime victim compensation funds would cover their medical care, therapy, education, and living expenses until they reached adulthood. But the detective knew that money alone could not heal the wounds these children had suffered. The network's customer base had provided investigators with a disturbing glimpse into the demand side of child trafficking. Arrests had been made across the country as federal agents tracked down subscribers who had paid for access to abuse materials. The investigation revealed that the network's clients included teachers, coaches, religious leaders, and other individuals whose positions gave them access to children in their communities. Each arrest led to the discovery of additional local victims and the identification of other criminal networks. Carol Thompson's foster home had become a model for other programs serving trafficked children. Her approach emphasized creating a sense of normalcy and safety, while respecting each child's need to heal at their own pace. The home included a large fenced yard where the children could play safely, a library filled with age-appropriate books, and spaces designed specifically for therapeutic activities. Most importantly, it provided stability and predictability that many of the children had never experienced. Rex's work with traumatized children had attracted attention from researchers studying the therapeutic benefits of animal-assisted interventions. A university team had begun documenting his interactions with various victims, hoping to develop training protocols that could be replicated with other therapy dogs across the country. The research was showing measurable improvements in children's stress levels, sleep patterns, and willingness to engage with adults when Rex was present. The sentencing phase of the trials had begun, with federal prosecutors seeking maximum penalties for the most serious offenders. Sarah Martinez had received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison, despite her cooperation with investigators. The judge had acknowledged her assistance in the investigation, but emphasized that her direct participation in the abuse of children warranted significant punishment. Martinez would not be eligible for parole for at least 15 years. Thomas Brennan, the building owner who had provided properties for the network's operations, had received a lighter sentence of 8 years in exchange for his extensive cooperation and evidence that he had been coerced into participation through blackmail. His testimony had been instrumental in identifying other properties used by the network and understanding how the organization recruited and controlled individuals in legitimate businesses. The international investigation had uncovered connections to trafficking networks operating in Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and Central America. The organization that had controlled Emma and Lily was part of a global system that moved children, money, and materials across borders with sophisticated FE. 2 years after the storm that changed everything, Detective Marcus Rivera stood in the backyard of Carol Thompson's foster home, watching Emma and Lily play with Rex in the afternoon sunshine. The transformation in both girls was remarkable, though Marcus knew their healing would continue for years to come. Emma had grown taller and had gained the healthy weight that proper nutrition and medical care provided. Her smile came more easily now, and she had learned to trust selected adults who had proven themselves worthy of that precious gift. Lily had made even more dramatic progress, finding her voice again and speaking in full sentences with the people she trusted most. Her artistic abilities had blossomed under Carol's encouragement, and her drawings now featured bright colors and happy scenes instead of the dark, frightening images she had created during her early recovery. Both girls had developed a special bond with Rex that transcended the typical relationship between children and pets. The German Shepherd seemed to understand his role as their protector and companion, never straying far from their side during visits. Marcus had accepted Agent Chen's offer to join the federal task force permanently, trading his local detective badge for a position as a special agent focused on combating child trafficking. The decision had been difficult as he had spent his entire career in local law enforcement, but the scope and importance of the work being done at the federal level convinced him that he could make a greater difference in this new role. Rex had been officially transferred to the federal task force as well, where his specialized training in working with trauma victims made him invaluable. The legal proceedings from Operation Broken Chain had finally concluded with the sentencing of the last major defendant. In total, 47 individuals had been convicted on federal charges related to trafficking, corruption, and organized criminal activity. Sentences ranged from 8 years for cooperating defendants to life imprisonment for the network's leadership. The financial penalties and asset forfeitures had totaled over $100 million, funds that were being used to support victim services and prevention programs nationwide. Carol Thompson had become something of a national expert on caring for trafficked children, consulting with other foster care programs and speaking at conferences about best practices for helping young survivors heal from complex trauma. Her home had expanded to accommodate additional children rescued from trafficking situations, creating a community of survivors who supported each other through their recovery journeys. Emma and Lily had become informal mentors to newer arrivals, showing them that healing was possible and that they could trust the adults who were genuinely trying to help them. Dr. Foster had published several research papers based on her work with the twins and other trafficking victims, contributing to the scientific understanding of how children cope with organized abuse and what therapeutic approaches are most effective. Her protocols for working with trafficked children had been adopted by treatment centers across the country, improving outcomes for hundreds of young survivors. She continued to work with Emma and Lily, though their sessions had evolved from crisis intervention to supporting normal adolescent development and addressing typical challenges of growing up. The international investigation had led to the dismantling of trafficking networks in 23 countries, rescuing over 300 child victims and leading to more than 200 arrests worldwide. The cooperation between law enforcement agencies had established new protocols for sharing information and coordinating investigations across borders. Marcus had participated in training programs with officers from other countries, sharing the lessons learned from Operation Broken Chain and learning about successful techniques used elsewhere. Emma and Lily had begun attending regular school, though they continued to receive additional support services to address the educational gaps created by their years in captivity. Emma had developed a particular love of science and mathematics, showing aptitude that suggested she might pursue technical or medical fields in the future. Lily's artistic talents had expanded beyond drawing to include music and creative writing, and she was participating in art therapy programs that helped other traumatized children express their experiences safely. Rex had sired several puppies that were being trained specifically as therapy dogs for child victims of trafficking and abuse. The specialized breeding and training program had been developed based on his success with Emma, Lily, and other children. These dogs were being placed with law enforcement agencies and victim service organizations around the country, expanding the availability of animal-assisted therapeutic interventions for traumatized children. The systemic changes implemented as a result of Operation Broken Chain had begun showing measurable results in preventing trafficking and identifying victims more quickly. Enhanced background check procedures had prevented several known offenders from gaining positions working with children. Improved communication protocols between agencies had led to earlier identification of suspicious activities and faster response times when children were reported missing. Training programs for teachers, social workers, medical professionals, and other frontline workers had increased awareness of trafficking indicators and improved reporting of suspected cases. Marcus had maintained a personal relationship with Emma and Lily beyond his professional duties, visiting them regularly and maintaining correspondence between visits. The girls had begun calling him Uncle Marcus, a title that filled him with both pride and responsibility. He had witnessed their transformation from terrified, traumatized children to resilient young people with hopes and dreams for the future. Their progress reminded him daily of why the work he and his colleagues were doing was so important. The financial investigation had continued to yield results years after the initial arrests, as investigators tracked down assets hidden in offshore accounts and shell companies around the world. The recovered funds had been used to establish a permanent trust fund that would support Emma, Lily, and other victims throughout their lives, ensuring they would have resources for education, medical care, and whatever support services they might need as they grew into adulthood. Agent Chen had been promoted again, now overseeing trafficking investigations throughout the entire region. She had established specialized units in major cities that combined federal agents, local detectives, and victim advocates in permanent task forces modeled on the success of Operation Broken Chain. These units had already achieved significant successes, rescuing hundreds of children and dismantling multiple criminal networks. The media attention surrounding the case had died down, which was exactly what law enforcement and victim advocates had hoped would happen. Emma and Lily's identities remained completely protected, allowing them to grow up without the burden of public attention and speculation about their experiences. They were just normal kids now, dealing with homework, friendships, and the typical challenges of adolescence, though they carried within them a strength and resilience that would serve them well throughout their lives. Carol Thompson had noticed that both girls had developed a strong sense of justice and a desire to help other children who had experienced similar trauma. Emma had begun volunteering at a local animal shelter, working specifically with dogs that had been rescued from abuse situations. Lily had started participating in art therapy programs for younger children, using her own healing journey to guide others who were just beginning their recovery process. The training and protocols, developed during Operation Broken Chain, had become the standard for trafficking investigations nationwide. Law enforcement agencies from around the world sent officers to study the techniques used in the case, and the investigation had been featured as a case study in training programs for federal agents, prosecutors, and victim advocates. The legacy of that stormy night would continue to impact how society protects its most vulnerable children for generations to come. As Marcus watched Emma and Lily playing in the sunshine, Rex running alongside them with the joy and energy of a dog who knew he was loved and valued, he reflected on how far they had all come. The storm that had brought him to apartment 2B had been the beginning of a journey that transformed not just the lives of two little girls, but the entire approach to combating child trafficking. Emma and Lily were no longer victims. They were survivors, thrivers, and beacons of hope for other children still trapped in darkness. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility, supported by people who would never let them face their challenges alone. They had found their voices, reclaimed their childhoods, and begun building the foundation for whatever dreams they chose to pursue. The storm had passed, and in its wake, new life had taken root and grown strong.